listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and have your work build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.
Hello and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Today our guest is Dave Blanchard, author of Supply Chain Management, Best Practices. Now Dave is editor-in-chief of Material Handling and Logistics and also the senior editor of the magazine Industry Week, where he shares his knowledge of inventory, distribution, and supply chain management.
Dave, welcome to the Author Inside You podcast.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you, Matt. I'm glad to be here.
All right, so can you tell us what was your primary reason to write your book?
Well, I actually go into it in a little bit in the preface to my book. Basically, it's not glamorous, it's not exciting. The reason I did it was I wanted to clear up all this stuff that I had just accumulated on my desk, and I just didn't want to have to file everything away. I thought, looking at these big stacks of research and reports and other clippings that I had accumulated over the years. Basically, as a editor for a couple magazines, I have to write stories constantly, but I don't use maybe 5 or 10% of an interview with somebody or a report that somebody may have put out, a 100-page report. I may only use a couple paragraphs of it or 1 or 2 pages worth, and the rest of it is still really great material, but I just don't have the luxury of going in depth, because with magazines, especially now that we're in the internet age and we're putting stuff on our websites every day, you don't have the time that maybe folks had a couple decades ago of really, writing a really long, in-depth piece. So I kind of thought, well, there's no reason why I couldn't continue some of these articles that I was kind of following up with and turn it into a book. And so that's kind of what I did. I had the inspiration of using all this material that was, just basically going to waste and would certainly fill a hole in the marketplace for this type of book. There really wasn't one. That's kind of if I leave nothing else with your listeners, I'd like them to know that the first thing you want to do with any book idea that you come up with is make sure that what you're going to do is sufficiently different from what's already out there. And if it is, you've already won a big part of the battle of getting a book published, because there really isn't anything like it out there.
Well, that's good. It's nice that you had too much information now, that you felt you had too much information and you could use it. That's nice. But who is your primary audience?
I kind of extrapolated it from the audience for my magazines, which are senior managers at manufacturing companies, retail companies, distribution centers, that kind of a supply chain focused business reader. So that was my first idea, was to write a book for the same people who are reading my magazine anyways.
Okay.
Because I would constantly get people saying, boy, I wish there was a book that kind of explained how the supply chain works. Because the supply chain, I won't go too deep into this, but supply chain is basically a bunch of different occupations and processes and sort of tasks that happen in a manufacturing company or whatnot. And sometimes they're tied together really tightly, and sometimes they're very loose. And the goal of supply chain management is to tighten that connection. So you've got the people who are in planning and forecasting what they think the expected sales might be for your product and how long it will take to bring it to market and how long it will take to manufacture it. And then you've got manufacturing people, you've got the procurement people who have to buy the materials, you've got the logistics people and the warehousing people, you've got the people who in transportation have to make sure that your products actually get delivered on time to the customer, and also they have to make sure that if you're waiting for raw materials to make your product, that material arrives on time as well. It was kind of my approach to selling the book to a publisher was there's books out there written by consultants, there's books out there written by academics, there's really not any book out there written by a journalist who covers it for business people. And the publishers, a number of them actually agreed with that, and ultimately I found the publisher I thought would do the best job promoting the book, and it kind of took off from there.
All right, now we have lots of questions about what you just said. So it seems like you have a big audience from your magazine, right? You already have an audience itching to learn more, and you already know who a lot of your audience is already because you have your magazine subscribers, and you know who reads the magazine, and you know who it's aimed for. So.
Right.
So after you came up with the idea of like, okay, so I'm going to write this book because I have so much information here, what did you do next? You had to write a proposal, you had to find a publisher, you had to check with your boss. What was the next step?
Yeah, all the above. The first one would be the proposal. And luckily, a lot of the business book publishers have their guidelines on their website. So if you are thinking, well, I've got a great idea for a book, I'm not sure how to get started, though. I mean, they'll tell you exactly what they're looking for in the way of putting a proposal together. And knowing who your audience is of tremendous benefit. And you know, like you were saying, I mean, I've got tens of thousands of readers through the magazine subscription, as well as, you know, probably 100,000 or more potential readers through the website.
Yeah, it sounds like a great advantage to get started.
It's a great advantage to be able to tell a publisher, I have exposure to this many people. Obviously, not all of them are going to buy the book, and I wish they would, but it's just not the way.
Of course,
it just doesn't work that way.
But you already know 100,000 people.
Percentage.
Right.
What publishers want to know is, what can you do to sell your book if we don't do anything? I mean, they're going to do work for you, and the publisher I went with, which is John Wiley, they do a great job of getting all their new books out in front of the potential market. But they also want to know, are you going to aggressively promote your book as well? Because that's really the whole key to a book being a success or not.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about the proposal? What was involved with the proposal that you had to write?
Okay, so this is for business books, but what they want to know is, it's almost like putting together a business proposal. It's that kind of a thing, and it's not one page and you just write down, fill in the blanks sort of thing. I mean, it takes a fair amount of work, because they're going to want to see. First of all, as we already been talking about, they want to know that you've got an idea what the target audience would be. They also want to know how knowledgeable you are, I should say, on the competition. By that I mean, are you aware of all the other books that are on similar topics? For me, being a magazine editor, I already knew what all the other books are, because they would frequently send me a copy, or at least they'd send me the promotion material, so I would know when new books were being published and what the topics were. And that's how I was able to look at all these and say, this book is fine if you're a student, or but it's written from a university's a university professor's approach. Yeah, their point of view that may or may not be what the audience I'm looking for would be all about. And what they would also do is, it would be a lot of theories. I mean, every profession has a lot of theories, which are important if you're studying it at that level. My book, the best practices part of the book was because I was going to focus on actual real-world companies and what they were doing to improve their supply chains. So it's not a book about, company X. It was a book about Walmart. It was a book about Boeing and Ford and dozens and dozens of other companies that I named, and I named the people that I interviewed. So it was more of a real world kind of an answer.
Right, that's very
cool.
So
that it was cool because it worked out that no one else had done that. If I'd said I wanted to do a book on theory, I mean, I would have had to approach it completely differently because I'd have to know what all the theory books were about and how mine was different. So that kind of analysis of the competition is really important to anybody who wants to write a book. Is you got to know what's already out there, because certainly any publisher is going to already know, and if the publisher has never done a book in the field that you're wanting to write about, you're either going to have to be really good at selling the idea, or conversely, you might want to just think about finding a publisher who's done a book kind of what you want to do about, but yours is going to be like a complement to theirs.
Right.
So, build their market for those kind of books, and they love that kind of stuff.
Sure. Good advice.
All right, so you found your publisher, and then how long did it take from when you started working with the publisher until it was actually in print?
I'm going to go back a quick step, because finding a publisher actually was more of a process than I thought it was going to be. Because the first thing I did was I pitched it to. There's different tiers of publishers. I mean, Wiley would be the publisher I went with. Wiley would be in the first tier, so they've been around for more than a century, maybe 2 centuries. I'm not sure how long they've been around, but they've been doing business books forever, and they're very well established. They're based in New York City, and I've got a lot of books from them. I didn't go with them at first. I didn't pitch the book to them. I pitched them to what you'd probably call a second tier publisher. So they also do business books, but they just don't have the reach or the history of doing it like a company like Wiley would. And they had on their website. I'm telling your listeners what not to do.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Their book proposal guidelines. When I was talking before, it's not just a page. Well, theirs actually was a page, and you really could fill it out. You could fill it out online and just submit it, and it maybe took me a half an hour or an hour. And then the next day, the publisher called me and said, "Oh, we really liked your idea. We'd like to talk to you about maybe publishing your book." And I'm immediately excited.
Yeah.
And adrenaline's pumping.
Sure.
But when I got off the phone, I realized that was too easy. I didn't accept his offer right away because I wanted to think about it for a little while. And I just thought it was too easy. If they're going to jump at a book, after me just basically filling out a little form, then maybe I should shoot higher. Maybe I should do a bit more complete of a book proposal and pitch it to the top tier publishers. So that's what I ended up doing. And
sure, why not get rejected from the best, right?
Well, exactly,
right,
and
yeah,
I did. I got rejected. Well, I got rejected from a couple of them. I think two or three publishers were very interested. One or two of the top tiers just said no thanks. So I ended up, and I didn't pitch it to any other of the second tiers because I thought, well, I've already got the ones I'm interested in. I've got their attention, so I'll just concentrate with them. But before I sent it to Wiley and a couple others, I did spend the time. I didn't just spend a half an hour or an hour on filling out a website. I probably put a good week's worth of time into it. I've got a day job, so I would do this at night, but I would work every night and just kind of put things together. One thing that they definitely, the top tier publishers want, which the second tier didn't ask for, are sample chapters. So that's exactly what it sounds like. You've got to write part of your book and send it in so that they know what your writing style is like. And you may have the greatest idea ever, but if you can't string sentences together,
they're not interested.
And I also, well, they're not interested. I had the advantage of being a writer
Professional
anyway.
writer,
So
yeah.
I could, yeah, I mean, I could say, well, here's my sample chapters. If you want to read more, here's the 30 years worth of articles I've written on the web.
And so you're saying sample chapters with an S at the end, not just one sample chapter, but sample chapters.
Yes, and now some will ask for one chapter, a full chapter. So it could be 20 pages or more. What I did with my book was, rather than do a full chapter, because that is a lot of work. Not that you're going to have to write the chapter sooner or later anyway, so you might as well get comfortable with the idea that you have to write a lot. But I did shorter, like excerpts from like 3 different chapters, so they could see this chapter is going to focus on this way, this chapter is going to focus on this way, and that. So I won't go into the negotiating part because that's a whole podcast by itself. But and also going through contracts. I spent a lot of time looking at contracts, and I got to be pretty well versed on it. I didn't hire an agent either, so I did the negotiating myself. Ultimately, they changed a little bit of the approach I wanted to take. Since it was going to be their book, that's fine. I had an original idea, and they just tweaked it a little bit because they have. The original name for my book was not Supply Chain Management Best Practices. They have a whole series. Wiley has a whole series of books on best practices. So it might be like accounting best practices, or they probably got dozens of them. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to put it into that
chain ladder,
kind of that category.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned professors and textbooks. Does anyone use your book as a textbook in a class?
Yes, actually, that ended up being the one thing I didn't count on, which has ended up being awesome. I mean, it's awesome how many, and not necessarily undergrad sorts of classrooms. So you wouldn't go to any university and see it, but a lot of continuing ed courses or graduate level courses, or just a school might have, one course on supply chain management. I've gotten to talk to meet and I've talked to a lot of the professors who are using the book, and the people who are getting the book, they're not novices. They're people who are already into their careers, but they're learning what supply chain management is all about, so they can, be better versed and add that to their career path.
Very impressive.
So yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought that would be. I didn't write the book originally thinking that was what where it was going to end up being promoted to. But John Wiley has a lot of contacts with. I mean, every library in the United States, in fact, they have contacts around the world.
Right.
But they know all the libraries. So that was part of the things I didn't imagine would be a huge market for the book, but it ended up being it's been a steady stream of interest through that kind of a thing, which I think that's great. That a lot of people say, well, why don't you just try to self-publish it? Then you make more money off of each book, because really the book sells for. I think the current. I've done a second edition since then. The cover price is like $60, but nobody is ever going to pay that, because you go into Amazon, it's a lot less than that. But I just get a small percentage of
each sale. Each sale.
Each sell, but it's and the way books are sold, it's not like someone buys my book and they send me a check the next day. It's not like that. You have to go through a royalty system and a percentage of sales and all that kind of thing. But anyway, the good news is that the book has continued to sell.
Yeah.
I wrote the first edition 10 years ago, and I still get a little bit. No one's going to get rich off of writing these kind of business books unless their name is Stephen Covey or something. But
right. So Dave, are you doing anything to promote it with professors? Do you contact professors, or is that more just what your publisher's doing and You're just happy with the results.
I talk to publishers about getting ideas for future editions, because they'll tell me, actually every so often someone will invite me to speak to their classroom or something, or speaking to a group of not necessarily even students, but just people who are interested in supply chain. And I'll talk to those groups, and I'll go through the basic message of the book, and the message of the book is here's not what Dave Blanchard thinks, but here's what all these world-renowned companies think, and what they're doing with supply chain, what they're doing with technology, what they're doing with their people, their workforce, what they're doing with their processes, and how they're improving things. So that's what people are really interested in, at least from my perspective. They want to know what the other guys are doing so they can copy it.
Okay, all right. Well, it's interesting that you wrote this book, and now new avenues are opening up to you that you did not imagine. That's fun. All right, Dave, what's the best way for someone to purchase your book?
Oh, the best way would be how just about the entire world purchases books now, would be to go on to Amazon and just go and look up, Supply Chain Management Best Practices is the name of the book. So you just type those words in, and it'll come right up.
Great.
One thing that's interesting for authors, me included, is Amazon has a ranking for every single book that's ever been published that's on their website. So when a book is doing really well, like a John Grisham book or a Harry Potter book, they're number one. That means out of every book in the world, that's the top seller. My book never got anywhere near number one. But for a business book, I watched it when it was first released, and when most of the sales came out. So that's one of the perks for authors, is you can go onto Amazon and look every day, or a couple times a day. I think you can do it, and your score will change. It doesn't really mean anything, but it's cool to look at.
Yeah.
It's like watching. If you had like Casey Kasem or somebody saying, you're moving on up the chart.
That's a great analogy. Well, Dave, thanks for being a guest on our podcast. I have just two more questions. What's the best advice you can give? What's the best advice you can give fellow authors who are listening? And how's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you?
Okay, the best advice I can give is don't underestimate how much work it's going to take. Once you sit down to write a book, you got to see it through. It's going to take you a long time, and you got to work on it steady. Just so don't think that, I've got this great idea for a book, I'll bang it out in a month. I had originally figured out it's going to take me about a year to write the thing, and the publisher wanted to get it out in one of their catalogs, which is a good thing for sales, but it put me on a little bit of a deadline pressure. I mean, I hit their deadline, but it became a lot of work. So just be prepared to get really familiar with your keyboard, because you're going to be looking at it a lot.
1 year, that's quite a commitment.
Yeah, but by the same token, like I said, it's not my day job, so it was nights and weekends.
Yeah, I understand. Right.
But it's still a good amount of work.
Well, you had a lot of information in there also.
That's true, and I did clean up my desk finally, because I took it all that stuff I'd been accumulating, and I was able to finally file it away.
Congratulations.
Got your desk clean. Got your desk clean and wrote a book in that year.
Exactly.
And then how's the best way for our listeners to get in touch with you, Dave?
Best way would just be through my email, which is dave.blanchard, Blanchard, and it's at Penton, PENTON.com. That's the company I work for.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dave, for being a guest with us today, and I'll have all that information in the show notes.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Leah. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to the Author Inside You podcast, and until next time,
right on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.